Let's go. Yeah. We came a long way. That's what the song say. And I could do all things. I could do all things. Yeah, I could do all things. Yeah. We came a long way. That's what the song say. And I could do all things. I could do all things. I can do all things. Yeah. I'm not afraid of the moment. I'm not afraid I can't hold it. I gotta show 'em. Gotta get up in the morning. I gotta do it for Kobe. Lately I'm zoning. Lately I know where I'm going. Taking whatever control it. Show me opponents. Show me opponents. I got a gift and I'm starting to own it. Yeah. We came a long way. And that's what the song say. And I can do all things. I can do all things. Yeah, I can do all things. Yeah. We came a long way. And that's what the song say. And I can do all things. And I can do all things. And I can do all things. Yeah. We came a long way.
Sure. And then as far as like the process for setting and where we start when we're setting with volumes, I think that the process kind of changes. At least in my mind, I have two very specific kind of ways of viewing volume usage. You either have volumes that you're using to manipulate the terrain, to change the angles. And in that case, sometimes I kind of just do what I call shotgunning volumes to the wall. I just put them in random places, or I line them up with seams that I think look cool. And then that's kind of the new canvas I have to set through. And then you have the other more sort of utilitarian, like kind of way of viewing volumes where you use them literally as holds. So you keep them in your back pocket as you're setting. You either haul them up or you put them up once you need, a higher profile hold or, whatever. There are a million reasons why you would do it that way. And I think for me, the best process that I've found is somewhere in between. I kind of paste features and ways like however I want to manipulate the terrain I have. And then I keep a few like smaller versions in my back pocket in case I run into a hiccup, or in case, hopefully while I'm up there, I find something that I didn't see from the ground, which is more often the case. So there are a lot of different ways. And honestly, I've set with a lot of people here in Chattanooga. Brando, I know that's probably where you got the top down sling and grip things from. But I set with, there are a lot of setters here who set top down. I like setting hands up, feet down. That's where I get the best product when it comes to sport routes. I don't think there's any wrong way. I think some are more efficient than others, but that's more of a consideration when you think about setting commercially and or competition. Home wall, like do whatever you want. You got all day.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. And I guess you kind of talked a little bit about aesthetics. Do you guys want to talk about aesthetics at all? It's almost like you don't have to, but it could be kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, you talk about aesthetics. You want to.
I love aesthetics. Like I come from a graphic design degree, and when I first was setting with people, it was not monochromatic in gyms. It was kind of a free for all. It was grab whatever holds you want, whatever sizes, and just kind of do whatever.
And everything looked like shit, didn't it?
It looked pretty bad. I mean, you have tape in all directions.
Oh, tape.
You have a ridiculous amount of holds. Every color.
Do you guys remember when tape going the same angle became a thing?
Hey, we do that at the spot still, but there's like 17 different reasons why we still use tape.
Right. Yeah.
We're moving away from
all same angle, same length.
Yeah, that's dope.
Mostly. But if we're talking about aesthetics, I guess like the key rules of thumb that I learned once it started going monochromatic and started getting a little bit more like setting competitions and setting for aesthetics was, using big holds when they're relevant in sequences where you're varying the degree of the line. I like to use the metaphor of calligraphy a lot. So when you look at calligraphy, you have these thin lines into thick lines, and it makes these beautiful patterns. So if you think about setting aesthetically, using thinner holds and smaller holds and then bigger holds to juxtapose the look of your wall. And then also clustering smaller holds into like little patterns can also be a really fun way to set. You don't always have to plan. I think that we as setters tend to want to create the sickest movement ever, create the sweetest dyno, but sometimes just creating a really interesting and beautiful pattern on the wall with movement in mind can really create some awesome, stellar, just moves. I've climbed some of my favorite boulders that I just thought was going to look amazing on the wall with the holds that I had, and the movement just turned out to be something I didn't expect.
To riff on that real quick, Brando, beyond using smaller holds to create patterns, right? Like we can cluster and build features out of smaller holds as well. But what you said about the juxtaposition of small and large features, I couldn't have said better, right? Because it's with some newer setters, it's enticing to use all of the big grips that whatever are available to me, or it's equally easy for a less experienced setter to get kind of pigeonholed into I'm trying to set something ticky-tacky, and therefore there's nothing that grabs the eye on the wall. And you definitely want to, assuming you're trying to set aesthetically, assuming you're in a commercial or competition setting, you want people to see the line and be like, oh, that looks dope from across the gym. I love that metaphor of calligraphy. You want to catch the eye and allow the eye to move through the line, and ideally make your user say, I want to climb that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. I don't know if this is that helpful for home walls, but what Isaac is saying is just having those lines in the gym that people are attracted to because they're so aesthetic is very helpful for I don't know, your members staying psyched, or anyone walking in the door for the first time too. If you can use some of those big holds on easier boulders, it's so helpful for people walking in the door for the first time, oh my god, I want to climb that, and they can actually get on it, and it's not a V8 or whatever. I think old school setting, we kind of had a mentality of just saving the bigger feature holds or anything like that for harder boulders, so we're not wasting them. But I think where gyms are going now, and hold budgets and everything else, we can use those big holds on easier boulders. And again, it's so much more exciting for everyone of whatever skill level they are coming into the gym to be able to walk in and be excited to see whatever it is. With that being said, you don't have to set every boulder with only feature holds or whatever else. But that's something I try and keep in mind too, throughout every grade, at least commercially.
Right. I mean, in the commercial setting, right, we want everything to be balanced, right? Not everything can be the most aesthetic line. Some things, some boulders will look like one color of Skittles just got tossed on the wall. It's going to be a bunch of small one hand-sized grips. That is going to happen, and you need those, right? But it's our job in that setting to have our finger on the pulse of it and to make sure that we're creating that aesthetic experience for our users, but also hitting whatever targets that we have in terms of training style boulders as well.
Yeah.
To make everything look beautiful. I mean, Brando, I also have a art background. My degree is in painting and printmaking and art history. So that's funny that you would say that, right? So now I get to make pretty abstract compositions on a climbing wall with these brightly colored holds. So I think maybe you and I have a similar approach. If you could make everything look beautiful, why wouldn't you?
Right.
But certainly with the limitations of home wall setting, but we as well in any commercial gym understand that resources are still limited, and not everything's going to be a visual banger. Just still fucking climb well, though. Pardon my language, right? There's no excuse for poor movement, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that might be more important than aesthetics, but also it's cool to have some aesthetic boulders up. Also, right. Trash boulders make those aesthetic boulders stand out a little bit nicer.
For sure. But that's more, again, I was saying, focusing on on like the micro, and then stepping back for a second and looking, if you want your home wall to be visually appealing, you just have to be conscious of how the space is used, right? So hypothetically, let's say you have this 12-foot wide wall. The first two boulders that you set you set a boulder on the left that's using all of these giant feature holds. And then you set a boulder to the far right that's using all of these tiny little Technic crickets or like smaller crimpy jug things, right? The third boulder that you set, you have to be really conscious of how things are playing with each other. You don't want to set another tic-tac small boulder over here on the right because there's already one. Maybe you set it over there. And then maybe just so there's like some sort of balance. And even if people don't understand like that you put that thought into it, it'll be completely subconscious, but the wall will look much better than kind of just stamping it. Then it'll be really heavy over here and really light over there. And they won't know why it doesn't look good. They'll just know that it's not as appealing to them. And then also you guys with the graphics backgrounds, I don't really understand it, but like the rule of threes or the rule of thirds, like you want to make any boulder or route look good, just put three holds that match next to each other here. For
that is a bigger rule of thirds for sure.
People will love it. They'll love it. It'll be the most beautiful boulder they've ever seen.
The challenge is trying to make you use all three of those in sequence.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for you guys at home. Set
Ideally, right?
Be like right next to each other and force them to touch all three in the sequence the way you wanted them to. It's hard to do, but it's really cool when it comes.
Yeah, that's one of the dopest like little challenges that you can give yourself. Like, oh my God, you screw on a blocker that you then have to use in a specific sequence. Like that's really fun. And like, I don't know, it like gives us as experienced setters, I guess, like more of an additional challenge, right? Like something to grow into, and adds a level of potential frustration that we get to work through and grow from.
Yeah, that's something I do with my setters commercially. It's just like giving them challenge boulders occasionally, and like I either based off of like what they don't typically set, or just like specific moves that like, yeah, we're gonna have to work through in forehand, but also like now's the time.
So yeah. Have you seen I'm sure we've all seen the card game.
Yeah,
it's so fun, so dope to do with like a crew and use as a learning tool or a challenge tool. Should I describe that for the viewers at home that may not be familiar?
I actually don't know what this card game is. So
okay. Oh man, I don't have mine where I am right now. But it's a card game that was created by, I think this, whatever it's called, like Punk Setter. They're based in Europe. It's Blocks distributes it, and I know that most of the proceeds, or maybe all of them, go to the CAC, the Climbers Against Cancer Initiative. But it's dope, right? So you've got, it's color coded, and there's a lot of different different subjects. So maybe one is like what category you're setting for. It might say like FYC, right? Female UC. Maybe another is like RIC, risk intensity complexity, like Miles was referring to earlier. Maybe one RIC card says like 243, and the next one says like 115, and like distributing a handful of cards. Sometimes they'll say style of movement, style of holds, and okay, I'm gonna give this route setter one from style of movement, one from RIC, one for type of holds.
Cool.
And like that's your challenge, like build your boulder. It's a super dope learning tool. And if you're at home, like if you're setting at your home wall, and you can find this, I know that I might even be able to Google it right now and find it for you. But if you just Google in like route setting card game or Punk Setter card game, you'll find it, and you'll know that it's the right one, because it'll say like goes to CAC. Buy that for yourself. See if they're shipping them right now. It's a really cool learning tool for people.
Honestly, even if you don't know what the hell half the cards mean, just whatever direction it forces you in,
right?
Like kind of entertaining. Like there's a high-level USAC route setter who really likes to use phrases and a word randomizer as inspiration for a boulder, and it'll like it'll just force you in these directions. And for someone who's not comfortable with often stepping outside of what they like or what they prefer, it might be a great way to maybe not set 10 boulders that are great for you and never really challenge yourself, right? Like rocket ship goat cheese. What does that mean? Who knows? Try to route set it. Like try to put it on the wall, and whatever your interpretation of that combinations of words are is, maybe that'll force you into some weird place that, it might not correlate at all, but at least it'll be different.
I actually
don't know how to set hamburger.
I have a similar technique, but I get a lot of like musical recommendations, and sometimes I just like to throw something new that I've never heard on, and that will totally affect the way that I set, like completely change it. So I like getting affected mood-wise by that. And just to add on to the card game, I actually never knew about the card game, but what I've done is compile just a list of my favorite moves. And sometimes we'll just throw those randomly into a hat, and like half them will be foot movements and half of them will be hand movements. And I'll just have my setters draw, a couple of each out of a hat and try to add it to a boulder. So even if you don't, know or want to buy a card game, you could just come up with your own kind of like drawing out of a hat style game for yourself. That could be really fun, or, create something for your friend, like you pick two moves or I pick one and you pick one, and, we reverse. So,
yeah,
I think that could be actually really helpful for setting a home wall too. Cause like, if you think about like, I don't know, like new setters or whatever else, there's so many factors that go into what boulder you're setting. I mean, you have like a specific wall angle and maybe whatever holds you have access to. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But you could take like some of those other factors out of that too. It's just like, okay, so I'm going to try and just like set this one specific move that this is giving me, and like having all these different categories. So it's like a little bit easier to like think through instead of like starting from scratch and just like a pile of holds. And it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Everybody should go get that Punk Setter route setting game. Check it out.
Don't see the link I just sent you.
Yeah, so if you guys go to www.climbers.cancer.org/shop, and then you'll find it, Punk Setter route setting game. Check it out. And I heard there's one more way to make things look good aesthetically, something called the filth wagon. I don't know.
That's like anti-aesthetic.
Is it anti-aesthetic, or is it just a different aesthetic?
I think it's just different.
So that's the thing, right? Like aesthetic, that's all relative. Honestly, the filth wagon had nothing to do with making boulders look good. It kind of turned into this weird like anti-style, but for me personally, it was a challenge. I was focused on lining volumes up. I was focused on only setting within certain families of holds, or only setting with certain families of holds. And there are a million reasons for that, but it was a challenge to myself to see what happened if I didn't. And kind of understanding how to modify holds. The thing with modifying holds or screwing holds onto things, or that's not new. If you look at like any Euro wall, they've been doing that for a long time, man. Or somebody had a reference to, they came across a bunch of mini jugs that were filled with cement, right?
Tony Yaniro in the Miami Rock Gym just kind of put concrete or plaster inside of these like deep jugs just to make them not jugs anymore, and it's just a unique way to take care of jugs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me as a setter, I came from a gym that had unlimited resources, and we just had everything. So if you needed the hold to set the thing that you wanted to set, you could find it. And I kind of thought that, like, honestly, that was the easy way out sometimes. And it was fun to kind of just like take a bucket of holds that I hadn't really chosen, throw them on the ground, and then still force myself to set the thing that I wanted to set, regardless of what was standing in front of me. And sometimes that kind of forced me into a position where I had to like modify things a little bit, or change things around. And then there are other practical reasons we set here with curved walls, not like perfectly smooth planes. Sometimes I want to put a giant volume on a curved wall. And the only way to get away with that is to take away any sort of safety risk things, right? So you have to block the gaps behind the holds. And it kind of just turned into this thing. I was being sort of silly about it. But you know, it's a matter of opinion. I kind of go back and forth on how I feel about it, but ultimately, like, don't screw on jibs to a $400 fiberglass hold that's brand new. Like, there's no excuse. If you have a 400, if you have a bunch of flat hold, like, chances are you have whatever option you need to make the thing work. For me, it was just a way of kind of challenging myself in a new way, or to learn something new.
Are you sure ultimately don't? Like,
I mean, no, yeah, go for it. Like, disrespect your surroundings if you need to, but
right.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I maintain the unpopular opinion that, like, you should jib fiberglass if it's the right thing to do. Right? If the fiberglass, not all the time, Sarah, and not.
No, I have something to say past that, but okay, continue.
I like, they're tools for us to use to achieve a job. And no, like, we shouldn't jib fiberglass all day, every day. Like, Miles is correct. Like, ultimately, if you have those resources, you probably have the correct hold over here. What if you don't, A? And what if aesthetics for this particular climb is as important as the way the climb functions, or at least close to as important? And all you got to do is jib that no shadow tiptoe to that Thunderbird, and the move goes.
For sure. You see that all the time in competition climbing, right? You watch IFSC streams, and from back here, everything, you think, like, how are they holding that? Like, what is going on? And then finally you see this like close-up view or a different angle, and you realize, like, oh, there are no shadows stamped all over this thing.
Yeah.
Right. So
don't always do it. And when you do it responsibly, right? Because, like, there are people that just, like, will jib stuff to fiberglass without backing, right? And, like, the trick of using like a wood block backer to a screw on is maybe something that we have a responsibility to enlighten our viewers about right here, right? Like, because if you're at home, you're like, oh, I've got this fiberglass whatever feature, and I want to make it work on my wall, and you're going to start just throwing screws through it. You should know that there will be greater longevity to that jib if you put a wooden block behind it that those screws can actually bite, because the fiberglass is only so thick.
I think first off, for competitions, do whatever you want, but commercially, I think it depends on what gym you're at. Because, like,
Sure.
If you don't have that big of a hold budget, or you like are on a freeze for being able to buy new holds or whatever, I think it's important to kind of try to preserve those holds, especially if it's like brand new fiberglass or whatever. And it's the other day, Miles, were you saying Mark Mercer like numbered the bosses?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but that's like, that's the same
episode.
thing. If you have those numbered, like, you can destroy like the oldest ones or whatever, but like kind of like be careful and save the newer ones for the longevity and everything. And again, it's like, it comes down to resources. If you have like a big hold budget or whatever, and it doesn't matter that much, be my guest, but also like keeping that in mind, I think is helpful.
That's an awesome tactic, that numbering of the feature holds.
Wow,
Another thing that I'd like to add, sorry, Brando, I just want to finish this thought fast.
Yeah,
for anyone who's not aware, you can fix fiberglass and holds. Like you can patch things that you've jibbed if you remove the jib. I've got a hold, I jibbed it, I took the jib off, now I've got two ugly holes going through it. I can throw a piece of duct tape over that, and I can take a clear 2-part epoxy from the hardware store, and I can squeeze it in the back and like gravity carry that down into that duct tape. And when it dries in a couple hours, I can remove it. And sure, you can maybe see the holds if you're looking up close, but the hold is functionally the same. You can no longer feel them. And you put it on the wall and you stand 5 feet back, you'll never notice. Just as like a pro tip, if you will. Like you can do that. Some gym owners will still get mad at you for jibbing their feature and removing said jib. So be aware of your setting, right?
Right, for sure. So I'll explain the numbering of the holds because I think that's it's brilliant.
Yes.
But like also like the modification of holds or that kind of thing, I think for me in the situation with our resources here was that I started recognizing some of my younger or newer setters grabbing the new stuff always. They just wanted to like grab the big, cool, brand new Stealth or whatever it was. And I, you know, it was, I kind of wanted to make a point that like you could make a statement, you could evoke an emotion, you could get someone excited or whatever about a route that you've set using old, like shitty holds too. And a way to do that is to like cluster them in like these gross things. And it all comes down to your market, right? Like most of my market, they're like outdoor climbers. They climb hard. They enjoy the uncomfortable and like the tweaky and the weird, right? So like where they're not necessarily psyched on the giant squadra holds, but you put this like conglomerate of disgusting things together and they get psyched on that. So like if the, you know, the general larger percentage of the industry thinks it's ugly, that's okay. But as far as my community is concerned, like a lot of them are psyched on it. And that's my job, is to get them psyched. You know, as far as numbering the holds, so my former head setter, this guy named Mark Mercer set out of Florida. He now sets in Seattle for Momentum. He was like this lucky human. He had 11 bosses. If you don't know what a boss is, you should look it up because it's like the classic macro hold, in my opinion, right? It's just like the super cool, like font, kind of bubbly, big hold. He had 11 of them in the same color. So what he did was he numbered them on the back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way through 11, and designated them essentially like 11 is like your prized possession. You treat this thing like your baby. And then number 1 is like the oldest or the one that needs to be used as a start foot or some sort of in some weird way that's going to receive a lot of abuse. That's where kind of that one goes, so that you could keep track, so that you weren't, I guess, destroying all of the holds. You were, you know, they were degrading it like a, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, that's it.
Progressively.
Progressively. Yeah.
Progressive.
Cool. And it was just like being able to differentiate, because there were some, like three of them were original. So, you know, they were kind of like glossy and slimy. So you always knew like, oh, let's use these for this. And then the other ones were like high textured. Yes. Yeah. So that's what it looks like. Super cool, man. That is like, I've never seen a smaller gym that had a better hold selection. And it was like purely thanks to him and his like hold nerdiness.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this, what you guys speak to, filth wagon, jibbing, volumes, we said this before, you got to know the rules to break the rules.
For sure.
Sure. Yeah, totally. Yeah, if it's your first time setting on your home wall, don't like buy a bunch of fiberglass and screw shit to it. Yes.
Or do.
Or do.
That's
That's fine. That's cool.
I think a lot of
me
climbing came out of like the punk scene, and if you've ever seen Valley Uprising, and I as an artist, I fully subscribe to, break the rules, but know them first, know where things came from, and why you would be breaking those rules, and just have fun. I think just having fun and creating something new. I've actually modified broken holds. All of us as route setters have experienced broken holds in our gyms. Most of the time, I just, if we were going to throw them out, I'd bring them home to a home wall and I start screwing them on. I start like fiberglassing the ends and they become a whole new thing. So
chop it in half and polish where it broke or whatever.
Yeah, super cool. So just have fun with it,
Yeah, I mean, what's the difference between a hold that broke that you're repurposing and a chunk of wood that you pulled off, pulled out of your garage, right? Like, especially in quarantine.
Oh, and I actually have friends who used to drill press rocks, like that they would find outside.
Oh, yeah. That's like a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had some of those at my home gym too, in like upstate New York.
Super cool. Like old resin holds, like we were talking about, the old Boss was made out of resin, sort of glossier. I think that for some people at home, at a home wall, cheaper holds are typically resin or older or whatever, or make your own. Like you can make a quick resin, polyurethane resin mix, and then just kind of pour your own shapes. A friend of mine actually did sand pours, which is really cool. You can just create a lot of different interesting things when you start getting into like making your own stuff and being creative. So I challenge everyone who's at a home wall to create your own stuff and use those different textures like resin or polyurethane to create different feels for your boulders, because things might feel more outdoorsy if they're a little bit more polished.
Yeah, and also like in the, I don't know, like normal like commercial setting or whatever, there's a handful of different like pour houses or companies that pour their own holds or whatever else. So it's just like different texture. You would I don't know if you would like realize that or whatever, but you do come in different textured holds in a commercial gym typically.
Yeah, and to what Brando was saying about resin, if somebody at home is going to try to look that up, right? You're going to look for polyester resin, PE, which is still super popular in Europe, right? Because it's more durable and it maintains texture longer. It doesn't polish as quickly as polyurethane, which we tend to prefer here because it's more durable. It bounces, or it's more durable in the respect that it doesn't chip as easily, but it actually polishes more quickly.
Yeah, don't drop resin holds.
No, they should. They also, though, like they maintain a better temperature. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, they're denser. It's kind of odd how that happens.
Like, what's his name? Daniel French, who owns what's the
Composite X.
Thank you. Owns Composite X, or works with Composite X, is up there with Composite X. Did a little presentation last year at the CWS, the summit, about materials, and heat conductivity was like a major component of that. Like PE stays cooler; it feels better to the hand after multiple climbers. Mm-hmm. It also like is way heavier. So if you're not using a hauling line, even if you are using a haul line, it's like a total pain in the ass to set with PE on a tall wall. But for those at home who are going to take Brando's advice and experiment, and you can buy a silicone. You can buy. I'm sure even if you're in quarantine, you can order and have delivered to your home like cheap floral foam and a 2-part like silicone that you could use to make a mold. The name of the brand that makes the kind that's available commercially and widely, I'm blanking on right now. But you could look that up, like a silicone for pouring molds, and a cheap polyester resin, or a 2-part epoxy can work also. You got to make sure that it's going to be hard enough. But like experimenting with making your own holds at home is a super fun idea if you have a home wall and you're stuck in quarantine for another month.
For sure, and look around the house for like just things to dip. I mean, if you look at some of the OG So Ill holds, man, like those light bulbs and
this would make a dope hold.
Yeah, exactly.
That would not make a dope hold.
I'm gonna print on
Those
that.
are going to be funny in like 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. I made it in quarantine.
So, and that's a great kind of preview. We're going to talk more about holds and depth, guys. So hang on for that conversation. It's going to be super fun talking with these guys about that and volumes as well. I do want to just quick mention there is a DIY hold group on Facebook. There's also a home wall community on Facebook. You guys should definitely check that out. We actually pretty much hit everything that we intended to talk about just naturally here, guys. So I'm super psyched on how the conversations went. This was a lot of fun. And there are some questions that came through on Instagram if you guys have just a few more moments to chat about those.
Yep.
Let's do it.
Cool. So yeah, I'll probably, so thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to answer some brief questions that'll be in a follow-up video. So hang out and watch for that.